Hello there, I'm Albert.
And I'm Vanessa.
And we are late to the party, and it's another pandemic edition of Better Late Than Never. Still no Travis, he's at home.
I don't know how much longer our quarantine's gonna be, but we gotta be smart about this. One iota of food at a time. We'll be okay.
While we still trudge forward through pandemic viral outbreak films. And one of the ones that is on the top of the list when it comes to zombie pandemic type films, 28 Days Later.
Starring Sandra Bullock. Just kidding, 28 Days Later.
How do you confuse 28 Days with 28 Days Later?
We have Danny Boyle's epic zombie film written by Alex Garland himself.
Yeah, so you may know Alex Garland from recent movies like Ex Machina and Annihilation.
And I had no clue he actually wrote this until we were doing research for Better Late Than Never. It's interesting because this film definitely has an aesthetic to it that you don't see in mainstream cinema.
Right, it is very, I want to say the way that it's shot, it just felt very, didn't have a lot of money, but we wanted to make a movie, and I think that they edited and the way that it was shot and everything was perfect for the type of movie that they were trying to make.
And much like I Am Legend, they do go for the filming locations to kind of give you that organic sense of absence, lack of society. Everything is done for, everything is shut down, nobody's around, society has crumbled. And for them to be able to achieve that, one, they had to go to all these filming locations and get basically the streets to stop. Sometimes they paid money, sometimes they hired students, sometimes they just asked the cops really nicely, hey, could you maybe hold traffic for a little bit? We're going to run in, we're going to film, we're going to get out. And certain places actually took more effort. In London, the M1 motorway, they actually ended up shutting it down for 2 hours on a Sunday morning, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., and they only walked away with 1 minute of usable footage.
2 hours and they only left with 1 minute? That is insane. It's the way it is.
That's how you get those shots.
Yeah.
And the thing is the visual representation that this film has, it's shot on DV camcorders, digital, basically prosumer camcorders, and that's why you're getting that less than stellar non-film quality type look, because I mean it was portability for one, and the second aspect was it looks like it's shot from a survivor's point of view. Somebody who picked up a camera and walked around and was filming them while this was all going on. That's what Danny Boyle wanted to convey by shooting in these, but for the most part it was being able to run in there somewhere, film, and then run back out as quick as they could. But it does add a nice little survival aesthetic to the film.
Yeah, and I think it works very well for this movie itself. But let's get into the trailer for 28 Days Later now.
Lights shut down. It's a wasteland.
Yeah.
So who are you?
Wake up today in hospital. Wake up and I'm hallucinating. I've got some bad news. They're infected.
Infected!
Father.
Infected reflux!
Oh, I shouldn't have done that.
It's the blood. There's something in
They were
the
trying to
blood.
help, but then that just caused more problems.
Someone.
This feels
You never go
very
anywhere alone.
2000.
Yeah.
Like early, late 90s.
That's the two. Only travel during daylight. Unless you've got no choice.
This really is a bad idea. You know
Yeah.
why?
Shouldn't have gone in there.
It's obviously a bad idea.
We have to leave now. More will be coming. They always do.
Quick
music
cuts
is
everywhere.
the music's definitely where it's at in this movie.
And you're gonna be next.
I like how your days are numbered. That's clever.
Yeah, I enjoyed this movie. I thought that the way that it's shot and everything, and it's more so too not necessarily like, yes, the zombies are there, the outbreak is there, but it's also about that human condition, I guess, the human, nature of wanting to survive in something like this. And so it takes that story that way, where zombies are just doing like what their nature is, and then you have humans who are trying to do what their nature is as well.
Congrats! You did what zombies do.
And yeah, you do get the different aspects of survival, especially when it comes to Jim, when it comes to Selena, when it comes to Frank and Hannah. It gets dark. It gets very dark when it comes to the survivors of this film. Like, for instance, Jim is kind of naive. Jim is just a guy who ended up in the hospital, woke up, and everything is kind of crazy, and he's just kind of there along for the ride. And there are some of the survivors that have been through the thick of it and are a little bit more in tune with what has happened with society, or at least what it takes to survive in this new society. And that's what I love about Naomi Harris's character, Selena, because she takes no prisoners. When it comes down to it, you kill the infected. If somebody who is with you ends up getting infected,
Without
they're
hesitation.
done. Yeah, in a heartbeat.
Right.
In a heartbeat, you take them down.
Even then, when someone is like, "Oh, you bit?"
You bit? Huh? You bit?
And they're like, no, I'll be fine. It's like, no, you're gonna turn any minute and I'm gonna have to take you down, or else you're gonna try to kill me.
I was bit 10 minutes ago and I'm...
And that is her type of character too. And, when we're doing research about this and stuff, you find out that, Danny Boyle and Naomi Harris had a conversation about her character. Not necessarily being, it wasn't told about her character in the movie, but it was told, as a sideline for her, so she knows how to react to certain things because of something that happened in her character's past.
And essentially, she killed her parents.
Yeah.
The whole thing that they built up as her backstory, she had to kill her parents to protect her baby brother, who ended up getting infected anyway. So, she ended up having to kill him too.
Right, so she has that bit of in the back of Naomi's mind, she has that there, and that will that's her bringing it forward when she's saying, I'm a survivalist, I'm going to survive no matter what, and this is the trauma that I've been through, so I don't care at this point anymore.
And they did end up filming this movie fully in sequence, beginning to end, with the exception of pickup shots and, of course, reshoots. And at the time, it was shot pretty much during 9/11 while this was all happening. And in fact, in the scene of the Piccadilly Circus, you end up getting notifications around the statue saying, where is, my loved ones? And they got a lot of crap in 2002 because people said it was not very sympathetic to 9/11, when in the aspect, they shot it before 9/11, and it was actually just something people would do, and Danny Boyle ended up getting it from an earthquake that took place before, so that's where he got the idea. Funny enough, the filming location, when they went to go film it, there was actually scaffolding around the statue, so they made use of that and ended up building that around the statue to make use of the scaffolding that was ruining the shot. So, he ended up coming up with a way to creatively make it better, and it ended up being something that was so real that he ended up getting crap for it a year later after the tragedy of 9/11.
Right, and I get it because people think oh, why are you doing this in a movie? But you have to remember, these movies are made before a lot of things are happening, before 1 or 2 years before the movie even comes out in theaters. So it's they didn't know that this was going to happen for 9/11. It just ended up being this way. And it's just interesting how, that is, we were talking about before, how, human nature to do something like that. And he got it from something that happened in an earthquake. It happened on 9/11. And then it happened again, later on in other disasters that we've had later on. So it's a constant thing that's going to happen.
History repeats itself, and in fact, a lot of the images and shots that he ended up taking were from photographs of disasters or tragedies that have happened in society. So yeah, history ends up repeating himself. And even the day that they actually filmed the celebration celebration scene. It was actually on 9/11, and Danny Boyle said it was definitely not an easy shoot to be able to celebrate while a tragedy is going on at the exact same time.
What I think is funny is the fact that he hired or he, cast athletes to be the infected, which kind of reminds, even though Danny Boyle probably did it first, because it reminds me of Dawn of the Dead, where in Dawn of the Dead they also kind of did the same thing, but they also did get people who actually had lost limbs and stuff like that to be the infected as well. So they were a part of that, and that reminded me of that too. And I was like, okay, so they're taking essentially advantage of the situation. Practical is essentially what they're trying to do, instead of, having somebody who has all the arms and legs and then, have to CG it out.
And it's something that they definitely have to be conditioned for, because there's a lot of running, because there are a lot of takes. Like, just the tunnel scene ended up taking 2 days to shoot, and you're going to be running constantly for 2 days, so you got to be conditioned. So Danny Boyle brought in people that were capable of actually doing things that a normal person can't do, because you talk to stars or any sort of actor or actress when it comes to doing any of those action intense films, and they say it's exhausting because you are constantly running back and forth. So yeah, Danny Boyle bringing in athletes to pull off these scenes, it makes a lot of sense. It's funny though, did you know that the gas station that they ended up blowing up, they showed it in the trailer, communication was at a loss, so when it ended up happening, people ended up calling the cops, and you ended up getting the fire brigade over there.
Granted, they had permission to blow up the gas station, but everybody who lived around, because it was very in a, like, you can see it, it's kind of in a small area, and obviously there's residential around, and not knowing everything, like, you'd be freaked. I would be freaked out if I didn't know that they were filming something there. You'd be like, what the hell is going on? But yeah.
It ended up causing a stir. And the same thing ended up happening with the mass graves too. Somebody got in a car accident, called the cops. It was an investigation because they didn't know if it was real or not. Now, Cillian Murphy as Jim, he rose to stardom post 28 Days Later. So shortly after that, you ended up getting him in Batman Begins as Scarecrow. But he wasn't the original pick for Jim in this film.
No, as you know, you have that relationship that Danny Boyle has with certain actors, and one of them being Ewan McGregor. But there was a sense of falling out between the two of them, because initially Ewan McGregor was supposed to star in The Beach, but he got replaced by Leonardo DiCaprio, and that didn't go well with Ewan McGregor, so they kind of had a falling out at that time.
You guys, for how many years did you not talk for?
A long time, yeah.
Yeah, sadly, yeah.
So that's when Ewan McGregor was like, no, I don't want to do 28 Days Later with you anymore. So he was kind of taken out of the picture, and then they hired or casted Ryan Gosling for the part, but because of scheduling and everything, he couldn't do it. So then that's when they brought Cillian Murphy in. And
it was one of the better choices, I think. Because yes, absolutely, Ewan McGregor could have done it. Seeing what he did in Trainspotting, it would have been another great pairing between Ewan McGregor and Danny Boyle. But what I love is those new relationships that come out of it, Ended up getting Hans Zimmer joining up with Christopher Nolan was one of the best pairings. But now I think it's for them to move on and do something different with someone else. Danny Boyle has a relationship with Ewan McGregor, but then he ended up building a relationship with Cillian Murphy that moved on into Sunshine.
Right, he did bring him into Sunshine, which is a phenomenal movie too.
Absolutely stellar.
But speaking of, when you said relationships between composers and directors, we have one with Danny Boyle as well, in John Murphy.
Oh yeah.
So Danny Boyle and John Murphy have worked together
numerous
times. And John Murphy has a very distinct type of way of composing music. Like, you can kind of tell that, that's, how like you can tell Hans Zimmer's music from James Horner's music, from John Williams' music. You can do the same thing with John Murphy. For those of you who don't really know who John Murphy, maybe you might have heard some of his music. If you've never seen like 28 Days Later, or if you've seen 28 Days Later, he also did Kick-Ass. And then he also did music for Sunshine. But it's funny because some of that music that he took from there, he just brought it over to Kick-Ass. So you might hear some similarities in the music.
I'm at the edge of the chute.
some amazing scoring done by John Murphy, as well as partnering it up with the visuals that Danny Boyle has to offer. Now, music aside, this is one of the first few films that shot prominently in digital. There were some scenes actually that were shot on film. The ending sequence, which actually does look a lot better than the rest of the movie. But when it comes down to it, I think that ruggedness of the film did end up giving it that, you know, dark aesthetic that we needed in this movie.
Right, that gritty feeling, like you wouldn't be all polished or anything because it's supposed to be like this, you know, broken down, the world is ended essentially, there's nothing else left. And so it does, it adds an extra character to the story.
It really does. But one of the prime characters in this film is actually the virus itself, because that is one of the threats. It's the threat for most of the movie until it's not really the threat anymore, and then man becomes the threat. But essentially they took Ebola. Ebola is the virus that you end up seeing in the movie with a mutation of rage. So you've got the blood, you've got the hemorrhagic fever, you've got this, you know, horrible, awful condition that these people are going through. But it ended up getting, you know, a transition from being the infected to being the dark side of humanity. And that's what I love about this movie. It's like the threat is always there that you're going to be attacked by the infected, or you could get turned at any point in time. But really, it's the dark side of man that I think is the scariest part of this film. We ended up joining up with the last salvation, essentially, that we thought was available.
At least, yeah.
And that's what I love about these zombie movies. You know, there's always that one group that has come together and it's the answer to all your problems.
So
the one you could go, yeah, of course. And it's Christopher Eccleston, of course. Christopher Eccleston is leading the charge of these soldiers that have taken refuge in this mansion. And man, are they definitely at the end of their ropes.
Yeah, so basically though too, this story is just parallels between, you know, the infected and then what becomes of, you know, human race and what becomes of these renegade part soldiers that are kind of just doing their own thing and were promised something and then they have to live up on that promise and it just goes haywire from there.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's funny because at the end of the day, they had 3 endings in mind and 2 of them were shot.
Right.
One is the one that you see where it's the happy-go-lucky, like, oh, we've went through the trials and tribulations that are happening and the suffering with all the soldiers, and that ended, and now we are just kind of living quietly on a countryside until someone can save us, you know?
But the other ending was actually more dark. After the battle inside the mansion, which, by the way, John Murphy's in the house in the heartbeat.
Don't fucking leave me!
One of the best scores, in my opinion, in film. Like, just that song is so brilliant. And Wendy ended up using it in Kick-Ass as well for Big Daddy wrecking up the place. In the house in the heartbeat, and then seeing that descent into madness in terms of what the infected do and what Jim ends up doing, they're synonymous. I see them all as one and the same, except he's not in the madness. He's very in control of what's going on, but it's the rage that ends up taking over, the rage to save the girls of the house, the rage to basically do what he knew he needed to do in a heartbeat, just like Selena said, and that's take out the threat. And he ends up taking out the threat, every single one of them, with help from one of the infected. So, and I love the parallel of the 2 of them running through the house, doing the exact same thing. And even Selena almost kills him, and even Hannah ends up knocking him on the head because she thinks that he's one of the infected.
Right.
But then you see his face and there's no blood or anything. But yeah, it ends up going south for him in both endings. And the ending that you end up getting at the end of the credits, I didn't even realize it was there when we were watching it, but I guess they put it in theatrically after the fact.
We were watching it on Hulu. It's on Hulu, guys. So if you want to go watch it, you can watch it there. We were watching on Hulu and we didn't change it. We just left it. We were like, after the movie ended, we were watching it. We were on our phones on the thing. We just let the credits roll. And then the scene came up and I was like, oh, I've never seen this before. And so we were just watching it and it was very interesting. And I guess that was supposed to be the original ending. Like, that's the ending that Danny Boyle wanted. But,
correct.
But because, you know, they had test screenings for it and people thought it was just very dark.
Yeah.
Very, like, you know, they... if you've seen
too
it,
much
you would-
uncertainty. It's very ambiguous.
Right, because the character doesn't survive in that one.
Yeah.
And then you have...
But it's such a great bookend from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie.
I mean, I would think that I would like that too, but they also thought that there is a part where the girls walk away from it, and and then it shows like some doors shutting on it, and people were saying how it was too dark because they were essentially going to their doom.
Right.
But for me, when I watched it, it was more of like, okay, they have to now move on, and they're on their own. It necessarily did not mean for me like they're going to their doom at all.
At the same time, men didn't really do a great job in this movie for the girls too. Yes, Frank was a great protector, but even Frank ended up succumbing to the virus. Right. But yeah, these girls, I feel like they'll be just fine on their own because the last group of guys they came across, awful. So I think they'd be just fine.
And then the third one that they had in mind was completely different. I mean, it has them going to like a facility where essentially there is a doctor or a scientist or the doctor from the original, like where the virus first originated
in the beginning of the film.
In the beginning. And they take him there based off of what I've read, that he was actually the one that's strapped to, like the monkey was when he's watching all the horror that's happening. He is the one that's strapped down and watching all the horror and everything, and then they leave and then that just doesn't work out very well. And then it's the two of them, Hannah and Selena, and they're the ones that are in the cottage sewing and doing the SOS, and she's just talking to herself essentially.
I think the endings that you end up getting in the version that's out now is a great way, because you could see it as a happy ending, and if you click away and you don't have the patience to sit through the credits, you can be happy with that ending, but if you stick it through, you end up getting the true ending, which is, that never happened. All that must have been in his mind. He's dead. So 28 days later, guys, if you have seen it, tell us what you thought down below. 28 weeks later, that's a whole different film. Rose Byrne. Funny enough, Rose Byrne 28 weeks later, Cillian Murphy 28 days later, both in Sunshine. So
that's true.
Ended up carrying forward in the Danny Boyle universe. But what did you guys think of 28 Days Later? Let us know down in the comments below. You can also like and subscribe.
And do the thing on our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, Stardust.
All the social networking gin joints, you know where they are. Kick into the party, fuel the party, keep the party going on our Patreon. Gets you these episodes days before they are released live on our YouTube. Thank you so much. Check out the reactions that we just did for a bunch of TV shows. We've got What We Do in the Shadows. The Clone Wars is coming to an end. It's all available on our channel. But thank you guys so much, and as always,
now it's time to say goodbye.
This party is over.
Bye.
Bye.